You know the feeling, right? We all face those massive, high-stakes decisions where the future is just a total question mark. Do you take the new job, make that big investment, launch the new product? When the path forward is foggy, what you really need is a map. So today, we're going to build one.
Okay, let's jump right in with the classic business dilemma. Picture this. You've got a choice. You can either launch a bold, risky new product that could be a massive hit or a complete flop. Or you could take a safe deal that guarantees a decent but, smaller profit. How on earth do you choose?
Now, this isn't just some hypothetical question. Let me introduce you to Marcos Gutierrez. He's the director of marketing at a company called Latin Jogos, and he is staring down this exact problem. He's got to recommend whether his company should launch a brand new, limited edition cranberry juice for the summer. It's a huge risk, for sure, but it could also be a massive success.
So, here are the two paths laid out. On one hand, they can launch Juicy Arándanos, that's Spanish for cranberry. Now, this is a pretty unfamiliar flavor for their market, so it is a total gamble. On the other hand, they've got a sure thing, a white label deal to produce juice for a big supermarket chain. That's a guaranteed, absolutely risk-free profit of $155,000. It's the classic showdown, risk and reward versus cold, hard certainty.
So when you're facing a tangled web of what-ifs, you need a tool that can bring some structure to all that chaos. And that is exactly what a decision tree does. It lets us visually map out every single possible future. Now, what's really cool is how simple the building blocks are. A decision tree is really just made of two things. First, you've got a decision node, that's the square. This represents a point where you are in the driver's seat, where you get to make a choice. And then you have an event node, the circle. This is a point of uncertainty. It's a what-if moment, where the outcome is totally out of your hand.
Okay, let's start building this map for Latin Jugos. We always build from left to right, kind of like reading a book, following the timeline of events. So the journey starts with a square, our first decision node. Does Marcos recommend launching Juicy Arándanos, or does he take that safe supermarket deal?
Now, if he chooses the launch, that's where things get interesting. So we add our first event node, that circle. This represents the first big uncertainty. Which ad agency will they actually get? See, their top choice, Public Strategy, is pretty busy, so there's only a 70% chance they'll get them. Which means, of course, there's a 30% chance they'll have to go with their backup, Cola Media. But wait, there's another layer of what if. Even if they get Public Strategy, there's still a 20% chance that management won't even approve their ad campaign. Each one of these branches represents a future that is completely out of Marcos' control. And here it is, the whole shebang. This is the complete map of every single possible future. Just take a second to look at that. We've mapped out every possibility. Each branch you see represents a potential path, and it comes complete with the probability of it happening, like, market success or failure, and the final financial result, the profit or the loss at the very end. We've taken a messy, chaotic problem and turned it into a clear, visual roadmap.
So, we've got this amazing map, right? But how do we actually use it to find the best path forward? We need a way to calculate the value of each of these branches, taking all that risk into account. And that's where this really powerful concept called expected monetary value, or EMV, comes into play.
So what is EMV? Well, put simply, it's a weighted average. You take every possible financial outcome on a branch, you multiply each one by its probability of happening, and then you just add them all up. What you get is a single number that represents the average value of that uncertain path. If you could somehow repeat it over and over again.
All right, here's a super quick example to make this crystal clear. Would you take a guaranteed $5,000 salary or a riskier deal with a 50-50 shot at making $11,000, but also a 50-50 shot of making only $1,000? Let's do the EMV. Okay, so 50% of $11,000 is $5,500, and 50% of $1,000 is $500. Add them together, and the EMV of that risky option is $6,000. So, on average, it's actually the better choice.
Okay, we have the map and we have the calculator. Let's get back to Marcos and use EMV to find the single best recommendation for Latin Jugos.
So here's the trick. You start at the end, the far right of the tree, and you work your way backward. It's kind of like you're folding the tree back on itself. First, let's calculate the EMV for the market reaction if they get their top ad agency, Public Strategy, and the ad gets approved. We multiply each outcome by its probability, and boom, we get an EMV for this little branch of $265,000.
Now we do the exact same thing for the other major branch. What if they have to use their second choice agency, Cola Media? Again, we multiply the success and failure outcomes by their 50-50 probabilities. The EMV for this path works out to $150,000.
And just like that,
By folding back the tree, we've replaced all those messy, uncertain branches with single, concrete numbers. What started out as this huge, complicated map, as you can see, now looks, well, a lot simpler. We're getting so much closer to a clear choice. We've just got one more step. We need to figure out the total EMV for the entire Juicy Arandanos launch idea. So we take the value of the published strategy path and the colon media path, and we weight them by the probability of each agency being chosen in the first place. And after that final bit of math, we get our answer. The total expected monetary value for launching the new juice is $165,400.
So here it is, the moment of truth. When we put the two original options side by side, the choice becomes pretty clear. The guaranteed profit from that safe white label deal is $155,000, but the expected monetary value of taking the risk and launching the new juice is $165,400. Based purely on the numbers, the data says, take the risk.
But hold on. Before Marcos goes running off with his recommendation, it is absolutely critical to remember that a decision tree is a powerful tool, but it's not a crystal ball. There are some incredibly important things to keep in mind here.
So, a few quick reality checks. First, all those probabilities we used, they're educated guesses. They are not facts set in stone. Second, EMV is most useful for decisions you might make again and again. Think about it. If that worst-case scenario, that $250,000 loss, could literally bankrupt the company, the average value doesn't matter so much, does it? You simply can't afford that risk. And finally, this isn't the end of the analysis. It's the beginning. The really smart next step is always a sensitivity analysis to see just how fragile your conclusion is.
And you know, this might be the most important takeaway of all. The real power of a decision tree isn't just about getting a number, it's the process itself. As you can see from these steps, the tool forces you to think critically, to really understand the situation, to map out all your alternatives, and to honestly evaluate the risks. It's a framework for making smarter, more structured choices, not just for this one decision, but for every decision down the road. At the end of the day, it's a powerful way to bring clarity to complexity. It gives you a logical framework to defend your choices and, well, a map to navigate that uncertain road ahead. So, think about it. What's the next big choice you're facing, and what would your decision tree look like?